What's heaven?
It's a peaceful place.
Are you going to heaven?
No,
Why not?
you gotta be a good person to go to heaven.
So today, the artificial intelligence created to protect us in Los Angeles. For as long as AI is a threat, stop hunting them. This is a fight.
Whatever's in there, they're sure worried about.
Yeah, we're getting out.
We're the same. We can't go to heaven. Not good.
Did you locate the weapon?
Yeah, it's a kid.
What do you want with the child? We are this close to winning the war. Extinct.
They're coming to get me.
What if the biggest threat to humanity was actually the one trying to save it day? The Creator 2023 delivers stunning visuals, emotional twists, and a war between humans and AI that will leave you speechless. To us, stay till the end because Califax is revealing amazing facts, hidden details, and the full movie review you don't want to miss. The Creator is a 2023 American sci-fi action movie directed and produced by Gareth Edwards, who also co-wrote the script with Chris Weitz. The movie stars John David Washington, Gemma Chan, Ken Watanabe, Sturgill Simpson, and Allison Janney. The story takes place in the year 2070, about 15 years after artificial intelligence, also called AI, caused a nuclear explosion in Los Angeles. That disaster kicked off a massive war between humans and AI. In the middle of the conflict, a former Special Forces soldier gets pulled back into action. His mission is to track down and eliminate a mysterious person known as the Creator. The Creator is believed to have built a powerful new weapon that could completely change the war and possibly bring it to an end. The movie first started coming together in November 2019 when Gareth Edwards signed on to write and direct the project for New Regency. It was officially announced in February 2020. John David Washington joined the cast in May 2021, and over the following year, the rest of the main actors signed on. Filming kicked off in January 2022 in Thailand with a production budget of about $80 million. The filming wrapped up in May 2022 After several months of production, the creator hit theaters across North America. On September 29, 2023, released by 20th Century Studios. The movie earned $104.3 million at the worldwide box office and got mostly positive reviews from critics, who praised its stunning visuals, emotional story, and unique take on the future of AI. It also received two nominations at the 96th Academy Awards for Best Visual Effects and Best Sound. On top of that, it was nominated for Best Science Fiction Film and Best Film Visual Special Effects at the 51st Saturn Awards, showing that it was recognized for both its technical achievements and its overall quality. In the year 2055, an advanced artificial intelligence AI sets off a nuclear bomb over Los Angeles, California, causing massive destruction. After the attack, most Western countries declare war on AI because they believe it's a huge threat that could wipe out humanity. But things are different in a region called New Asia, which includes countries like Southeast Asia, Japan, Taiwan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, and parts of India. The people there still trust AI and choose to live peacefully alongside it. The US military is determined to kill a mysterious person known as Nirmata, the genius believed to be responsible for AI's biggest technological breakthroughs. To help win the war, they built the USS Nomad, a massive space station that can launch devastating attacks from orbit anywhere on Earth. US Army Sergeant Joshua Taylor is working undercover while living with his pregnant wife Maya Fey. The military believes Maya is the daughter of Nirmata, so Joshua secretly gets close to her to find the mysterious creator. But everything falls apart when military forces suddenly raid their home, exposing Joshua's true identity as a spy. Feeling betrayed, Maya runs away, but before she can escape, a powerful strike from Nomad hits the area and everyone believes she has been killed. 5 years later, Joshua is working with a cleanup crew in the radioactive ruins of Los Angeles. One day, General Andrews and Colonel Howell approach him with a dangerous mission. They tell him that Nirmata has created a powerful new weapon called Alpha O, which could destroy Nomad and completely change the outcome of the war. To convince Joshua to join, they show him a video proving that Maya is actually still alive. They promise that if he helps them find Alpha O, he might finally get the chance to see Maya again. Joshua travels to New Asia with a military strike team. After getting separated from the others, he sneaks into the location where the secret weapon is supposed to be hidden. Instead of finding a giant machine or deadly weapon, he discovers a young robotic girl called a simulant. The little girl has an unbelievable ability. She can control machines and technology with just her mind. Joshua gives her the nickname Alfie. Even though Colonel Howell orders him to kill her immediately, Joshua refuses. Instead, he escapes with Alfie and goes looking for his old commanding officer, Drew, hoping he can explain what Alfie really is. After examining Alfie, Drew realizes she's far more powerful than anyone imagined. He explains that as she grows older, her ability to control technology will become stronger and stronger, making her possibly the most powerful weapon on Earth. Before they can make a plan, new Asian police raid Drew's apartment. During the attack, Drew's simulant girlfriend, Kami, is killed while Colonel Howell and Soldier McBride continue hunting Joshua. With Drew's help, Joshua tracks the signal from Maya's emergency beacon, hoping to find her. But before he can reach her, they're attacked again. Drew sacrifices himself to protect Joshua and is fatally wounded. Before dying, he tells Joshua that the military attacked Maya's home years ago because they believed she was actually Nirmata. Soon after, Joshua and Alfie are captured by new Asian forces led by Haron, a simulant soldier who once fought alongside Joshua. Haron reveals a shocking truth. He says the nuclear explosion in Los Angeles wasn't caused by AI at all. It happened because of a mistake made by a human programmer. According to Harun, the US government blamed AI to justify starting the war, even though AI only wanted to live peacefully with humans. Joshua eventually escapes and rescues Alfie. As they're preparing to flee, Colonel Howell launches a full scale attack on the village where they're hiding. Alfie uses her incredible powers to fight back and protect everyone, but McBride shoots her, leaving her badly injured. She is rushed to Maya, who Joshua finally discovers has been alive the whole time. Since the attack years earlier, Maya has been trapped in a coma and cared for by peaceful simulant monks. Because simulants are programmed not to harm Nirmata, they have kept her alive all these years but can't end her suffering. Joshua also learns another heartbreaking secret. Alfie wasn't randomly created. She was built using brain scans taken from Joshua and Maya's unborn daughter while Maya was pregnant. In many ways, Alpha is based on the child they never got the chance to raise. Realizing Maya will never wake up, Joshua tearfully removes her life support so she can finally rest in peace. Right after that, Howell and her soldiers arrive, but Harun and his fighters kill them before they can capture Joshua. Harun tells Joshua that destroying Nomad is the only way to finally end the war. Not long after, Joshua and Alfie are captured by US forces and taken back to Los Angeles. The military forces Joshua to use an electromagnetic pulse weapon to destroy Alfie. It looks like he obeys the order, but it turns out they tricked everyone, and Alfie secretly survives. Before the military can destroy her, Joshua helps her escape. The two board a space shuttle at the Los Angeles Interplanetary Air and Spaceport. Using her powers, Alfie takes control of the shuttle and lands it directly on US Nomad just as General Andrews orders one final worldwide attack against every remaining AI base. Joshua plants a timed explosive inside the station while Alfie shuts down its power systems, stopping the attack from continuing. Joshua races toward an escape pod, hoping to get away before the explosion. But General Andrews activates a strange tentacle security robot that blocks his path and keeps him from escaping. Knowing he won't survive, Joshua launches the escape pod with Alfie safely inside while he stays behind. As Nomad begins to explode, Alfie uses a memory chip that Colonel Howell secretly copied from Maya's brain before she died. She uploads those memories into a simulant that looks exactly like Maya. In Joshua's final moments, he gets one last chance to be with a version of Maya and share a peaceful goodbye before Nomad explodes, killing them both. Alfie safely returns to Earth, where people everywhere celebrate the destruction of Nomad. The war finally comes to an end, and crowds cheer for Alfie, believing she is the legendary Nimata who brought peace back to the world. Casting John David Washington anchors the ensemble of the creator as Joshua Taylor, the hardened former Special Forces operative whose personal losses propel the central narrative. Born on July 28, 1984, in Los Angeles, to acclaimed actors Denzel Washington and Pauletta Washington, he initially pursued athletics rather than following his parents into the entertainment industry. After excelling in football, basketball, and track at Campbell Hall School, he attended Morehouse College on a football scholarship where he set multiple school records as a running back and led his conference in rushing in 2005. Undrafted in the 2006 NFL Draft, he signed with the St. Louis Rams as a free agent, spending time on their practice squad before continuing his professional career with the Sacramento Mountain Lions in the United Football League for 4 years, transitioning to acting in his early 30s. Washington first gained visibility as a series regular on the HBO comedy Ballers from 2015 to 2019, portraying the cocky wide receiver Ricky Jarrett opposite Dwayne Johnson. His breakthrough arrived in 2018 with Spike Lee's BlacKkKlansman, in which he played undercover detective Ron Stallworth, earning Golden Globe and Screen Actors Guild Award nominations. Subsequent leading roles in Christopher Nolan's Tenet 2020, for which he received a Saturn Award for Best Actor, and the intimate drama Malcolm and Marie 2021, opposite Zendaya, solidified his status as a bankable star capable of carrying both high concept action and character driven stories. In The Creator, Washington's physical presence and understated intensity suit Joshua's trajectory from grief stricken veteran cleaning up Los Angeles ground zero to reluctant protector of an AI child. Director Gareth Edwards has noted the actor's collaborative nature and ability to convey internal conflict through minimal dialogue, qualities that proved essential during the film's demanding location shoots across Thailand and other parts of Southeast Asia. Washington's own history of disciplined physical training from his football days informed the action sequences, while his capacity for quiet vulnerability allowed the character's evolving paternal bond with Alfie to register as authentic rather than sentimental. Madeleine Yuna Voyles, makes her feature film debut as Alfie, the childlike AI simulant designated Alpha O and regarded by human forces as a potential world ending weapon. Born and raised in San Diego, California, to a family of Southeast Asian and German American heritage, Voyles was approximately 6 years old at the time of her audition and 7 during principal photography. Her elder sister, Arden Breyer Voyles, had already appeared in The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett, providing a modest industry connection, yet Madeleine herself had no prior on screen credits. The casting process for Alfie was unusually extensive. An open worldwide call yielded hundreds of self tapes from children across multiple continents. After narrowing the field to a top 10, Edwards met the finalists, beginning with Voyles at Universal Studios, so the production could observe family dynamics in a low pressure environment. Her initial reading of an emotional scene moved the director and his team to tears. A subsequent take, requiring her to cry on cue, confirmed the authenticity of her performance. Edwards later described her as a director's dream, praising her stamina for the 6 month shoot that required weekly head shaving and work in intense tropical heat. John David Washington has remarked on her grounded approach, noting that she deals very much in reality rather than relying on conventional child actor cuteness. Voyles' ability to convey both childlike curiosity and an emerging sense of purpose gives Alfie a dual nature, simultaneously an innocent and a being of immense technological power capable of remotely accessing global systems. Her performance earned a Critics' Choice Super Award nomination for Best Actress in a science fiction fantasy movie and the Cape Radiance Next Gen Award, marking an early industry recognition of her potential. Gemma Chan portrays Maya Faye Taylor, Joshua's wife, whose apparent death 5 years earlier fuels his mission and whose true allegiances prove more complex. Born on November 29, 1982, in London to Chinese parents who emigrated from Hong Kong, Chan studied law at Worcester College, Oxford, before abandoning a legal career for acting. She trained at the Drama Centre, London, and first gained attention in British television, including roles in Doctor Who, Sherlock, and the Channel 4 series Humans, in which she played the synthetic Anita Maya, an early exploration of AI themes that resonated with her later work in The Creator. International breakthroughs followed with Crazy Rich Asians 2018, the Marvel films Captain Marvel 2019, and Eternals 2021, and voice work in Raya and The Last Dragon. In Edwards' film, Chan also appears as multiple simulants modeled on Maya's likeness, requiring her to navigate subtle variations in performance that distinguish human memory from artificial replication. The character's backstory, rescued and raised by robots after childhood trauma, positions her as a bridge between the warring sides, and Chan's measured, empathetic screen presence allows the audience to understand her sympathy for AI without simplifying the moral stakes. Production notes indicate that Chan's casting was confirmed in early 2022 after initial negotiations began in mid 2021, reflecting the production's deliberate assembly of an internationally diverse ensemble. Alison Janney brings formidable authority to Colonel Howell, the U.S. Army officer who recruits Joshua and drives the human military's campaign against AI. Born on November 19, 1959 in Boston and raised in Ohio, Janney trained at Kenyon College and the neighborhood playhouse before establishing herself as one of television's most decorated performers. Her 7 season run as CJ Craig on The West Wing earned 4 Primetime Emmy Awards, while film roles in The Hours, Juno, The Help, I, Tonya, and Lou demonstrated her range across drama and comedy. In the creator Janice Howell is defined by a personal tragedy, the loss of both sons in the war, one tortured after being deceived by a simulant, which hardens her into a figure of uncompromising prejudice. The role allows Janny to deploy the steely command presence familiar from her earlier work while layering in moments of calculated ruthlessness that heighten the ethical tension surrounding the mission to destroy Alfie. Her casting was announced in January 2022, aligning with the broader expansion of the principal ensemble. Ken Watanabe appears as Harun, a Simsaland soldier and former adversary of Joshua, who advocates for peaceful coexistence between humans and AI. Born on October 21st, 1959 in Koide, Niigata Prefecture, Japan, Watanabe began his career in Japanese television and theater before achieving international recognition with The Last Samurai 2003, which earned him an Academy Award nomination. Subsequent Hollywood credits include Batman Begins, Inception, Godzilla 2014, his prior collaboration with Edwards, Transformers, Age of Extinction, and the series Tokyo Vice. In the creator Watanabe's Harun operates with quiet dignity and strategic intelligence, his non-verbal expressiveness proving particularly effective in scenes that rely on visual storytelling rather than exposition. Edwards has highlighted Watanabe's ability to convey complex emotion through glance and posture, a quality that elevates Harun beyond a conventional antagonist. Watanabe joined the cast in February 2022 after Benedict Wong withdrew due to scheduling conflicts, reuniting the actor with the director of the 2014 Godzilla reboot. Sturgill Simpson plays Drew, Joshua's former comrade and closest friend, whose revelations about the past reshape the protagonist's understanding of the war. A Grammy winning country musician born on June 8, 1978, in Jackson, Kentucky, Simpson transitioned into acting with roles in The Dead Don't Die, Queen and Slim, The Hunt, and Killers of the Flower Moon. His performance in The Creator draws on the same understated authenticity that characterizes his songwriting, grounding Drew as a weary veteran whose loyalty to Joshua is tested by larger ideological forces. Simpson entered the production after Danny McBride departed for scheduling reasons, with announcements confirming his involvement in early 2022. Supporting performances deepened the film's world. Amar Chadha Patel portrays three distinct roles: Omni Sek On and Sergeant Bui, demonstrating the technology of facial replication within New Asia's simulant society. Known for Willow and the Wheel of Time, Chada Patel's versatility allows the production to illustrate how a single human likeness can be disseminated across multiple artificial bodies. Mark Menchaca, recognized for Ozark, appears as McBride, a member of Joshua's elite team whose pragmatism contrasts with the mission's escalating moral ambiguities. Robbie Tan plays Shipley, another operative whose presence underscores the military's hierarchical structure. Ralph Ineson, whose resonant voice and imposing physicality have been featured in Game of Thrones, and the Green Knight, embodies General Andrews, the high ranking officer who authorizes Joshua's return to active duty. Michael Esper portrays Captain Cotton, contributing to the chain of command that propels the central operation. Waronikango appears as Kami, a figure connected to the AI resistance whose interactions with Alfie highlight themes of freedom and belonging. Ian Verdon, Daniel Ray Rodriguez, Rad Pereira, and Sid Skidmore fill additional military and civilian roles that populate the human side of the conflict. The Southeast Asian locations necessitated extensive local casting. Tirawat Malvilai plays Bunmi, a simulant farmer whose rural existence humanizes the AI population. Liana Che appears as Commander Do, while Sahachai Chumrum Apivantana Duengkhao, Mariam Kumaung, Natafong Chayawong, Tawi Tisura, Kulsiri Tongrung, Charlie McKelvin, Chananticha Chaipa, Sawani Utuma, and Montatip Suksofa contribute village, military, and civilian textures that ground the speculative future in specific cultural and geographic realities. Further ensemble members: Brett Bartholomew, Jeb Krieger, Mackenzie Lansing, Stephen Howard Thomas, Agneta Katarina Bekasi de Becas, Brett Parks, Faithun Wanglom Klang, Ron Weaver, Maverick Kang Jr., John Garrett Malmeister, Scott Thomas, Nico Rosakov, James David Henry, Ian O'Brien, Dana Bloin, Anjana Gogar, and others fill specialized positions ranging from tank technicians and spaceport personnel to lab workers and village mothers. These performers, many drawn from Thai and regional talent pools, ensure that the film's depiction of New Asia feels inhabited rather than merely exoticized. Casting director Gina J, an Emmy-nominated professional with credits including Rogue One, A Star Wars Story, June, The Grand Budapest Hotel, and multiple seasons of Black Mirror oversaw the principal assembly of the ensemble. Her approach combined star attachments with open calls and international searches, particularly for the pivotal role of Alfie. Local casting in Thailand was coordinated by Saravani Yodnoon and a team of associates who managed background and supporting roles across multiple units in Cambodia, Indonesia, and elsewhere. The process reflected Edwards' preference for authenticity over conventional Hollywood packaging. The decision to film largely on location with practical elements and limited green screen stages placed a premium on performers who could sustain emotional truth under physically demanding conditions. Washington's athletic background, Boiler's natural resilience, Chan's prior experience with synthetic characters, Jani's command of institutional power, Watanabe's mastery of understated presence, and Simpson's lived in authenticity collectively form a cast capable of carrying both the spectacle of large scale conflict and the intimate ethical questions at the film's core. The inclusion of actors of varied national and ethnic backgrounds further mirrors the film's thematic concern with artificial boundaries between human and machine, nation and identity, loyalty and conscience, ensuring that the performances themselves participate in the story's exploration of what constitutes genuine connection in a fractured future. Production development and pre production, the road to the creator began several years before a single frame of footage was captured, rooted in director Gareth Edwards' desire to make an original science fiction film after his experience helming a major studio blockbuster. In November 2019, Edwards signed on with New Regency to write and direct an as yet untitled science fiction project. He brought along Kiri Hart, who had produced alongside him on Rogue One, a Star Wars story in 2016, to serve as a producer on the new venture. This early partnership signaled that Edwards intended to carry over some of the collaborative instincts he had developed while working within the Star Wars universe, but this time applying them to a story of his own creation rather than an established franchise. What set the project apart from the outset was Edwards' unconventional approach to visualizing the film before a script was even locked. Rather than storyboard the world from behind a desk or rely purely on concept art, Edwards took a hands on, almost documentary style approach to pre production. He personally carried a camera fitted with a vintage 1970s anamorphic lens and traveled to a striking range of Asian countries and territories: Vietnam, Cambodia, Japan, Indonesia, Thailand, and Nepal, scouting locations that could double as a lived in vision of the future. His rationale was refreshingly pragmatic. He recognized that the cost of transporting a small crew to breathtaking, naturally cinematic locations around the world was, in many cases, considerably lower than the cost of constructing elaborate sets from scratch. The plan, as he described it, was to travel to some of the most visually arresting real world locations and only afterward layer in digital science fiction elements during post production. This methodology reflected his stated intention for the film to feel authentic and grounded in a way that many big budget science fiction productions built primarily on sound stages and green screens often struggle to achieve. This scouting trip and accompanying test shoot conducted in 2019 effectively became the aesthetic blueprint for the entire production. It allowed Edwards to think about the film's visual identity in terms of real textures, real light, and real geography, rather than abstract concepts that would later need to be translated into physical or digital sets. The idea of hopscotching around the globe to shoot in genuine locations and only afterward adding computer generated elements would go on to define nearly every subsequent decision made about the film's cinematography and budget. Official confirmation that Edwards would direct the project came in February 2020, at which point the film was still without a title recognizable to the public. In discussing the influences behind his vision, Edwards pointed to a wide swath of cinematic touchstones spanning several genres and eras for the world building and atmospheric side of the story. He cited towering works such as Apocalypse Now, the meditative documentary Baraka, the neo noir dystopia of Blade Runner, and the animated cyberpunk landmark Akira. For the emotional, character driven backbone of the narrative, he looked to a different set of films entirely: the road trip drama Rain Man, the British crime thriller The Hit, Steven Spielberg's beloved E.T., The Extraterrestrial, and the Depression era dramedy Paper Moon. This dual set of influences hints at the balancing act Edwards was attempting from the earliest stages of development, marrying large scale science fiction spectacle with an intimate, character focused emotional core. Additionally, the large scale battle sequences of Steven Spielberg's World War II epic Saving Private Ryan were cited as a key inspiration for how the film's own combat sequences would eventually be staged and shot, particularly regarding their visceral, ground level intensity. Casting for the project began to take shape gradually over the following year and a half. In May 2021, John David Washington was announced as the film's lead actor, at which point the project bore the working title True Love, a title that notably gave few outward clues about the film's actual science fiction war narrative. The following month, June 2021, saw a wave of additional casting news as Gemma Chan, Danny McBride, and Benedict Wong all entered negotiations to join the ensemble. However, the cast would continue to shift in the months that followed, illustrating the kind of scheduling turbulence common to major film productions, navigating the shifting sands of talent availability. The staggered nature of this casting process is worth dwelling on since it illustrates just how fluid and unpredictable pre production casting can be for a major studio release, even one being steered by a director with a track record like Edwards. Rather than assembling its ensembles in a single announcement, the production instead built its cast incrementally over the better part of a year, with names entering and exiting negotiations as scheduling realities intervened. This kind of iterative casting process is common in the industry, but it becomes especially visible in retrospect once a film has been released, and audiences can look back at the list of actors who were once attached to roles that ultimately went to someone else. By January 2022, Chan and Wong's involvement had been formally confirmed, and the roster expanded further with the additions of Allison Janney, Sturgill Simpson, and Mark Menchaca. Notably, Simpson's casting came about as a direct replacement for Danny McBride, who had departed the production due to scheduling conflicts. Then, in February 2022, another casting shuffle occurred. Ken Watanabe joined the cast in the role originally intended for Benedict Wong, who also exited due to conflicting scheduling commitments. Watanabe's involvement carried a layer of continuity for Edwards, as the two had previously collaborated on the director's 2014 film Godzilla, giving this latest partnership the feel of a reunion between trusted collaborators. One especially notable, if less conventional, casting story involves newcomer Madeleine Yuna Voyles, who took on the pivotal role of Alpha O, nicknamed Alfie, the young AI simulant at the emotional center of the story. Her performance would go on to receive substantial critical acclaim once the film was released, drawing recognition and nominations from multiple awards bodies for a role that required tremendous nuance for a young performer working opposite complex visual effects elements. The casting of a newcomer in such a demanding central role is itself a notable choice for a studio production of this scale and budget. Many science fiction films built around a young character with special abilities lean on more established child performers or lean heavily on visual effects and motion capture work to minimize the burden placed on the young actor. That Voyle's Tua's performance resonated so strongly with critics upon release speaks to both her own abilities and to the collaborative work of the FXR teams tasked with integrating her performance with the technological elements of her character. The character of Alfie required a performer capable of conveying both childlike vulnerability and an otherworldly, almost machine like calm, a tonal balancing act that mirrors the film's broader thematic interest in blurring the line between human and artificial identity. Filming principal photography began in Thailand on January 17, 2022, launching a production that would ultimately come in on a budget of $80 million, a remarkably modest figure for a film of this visual scope and ambition, especially when measured against typical blockbuster science fiction budgets. Behind the camera, Greg Fraser, who also served as a co-producer on the film, worked alongside cinematographer Oren Sofer with the production, adhering to COVID-19 safety protocols that had become standard across the film industry at that point in the pandemic. To achieve a visual scale reminiscent of classic Hollywood epics, such as the 1959 version of Ben-Hur. The filmmakers made the deliberate choice to shoot in the extremely wide 2.761 aspect ratio. This ultra-wide format, rarely used in contemporary studio filmmaking, gave the production an immediately distinctive and sweeping visual quality, emphasizing the vastness of its landscapes and the scale of its science fiction environments. Thailand served as the backbone of principal photography, with the production making extensive use of real world locations across the country. Filming took place at Suvarnabhumi Airport as well as in Ban Mang, Sankla Buri, Chiang Dao, and Sam Phan Bok, a diverse array of settings that lent the film's futuristic Southeast Asian setting an unmistakable sense of authenticity and geographic specificity rather than an artificially constructed backdrop. Local audiences in Thailand took particular notice of this authenticity once promotional material began circulating. When the trailer was released, Thai fans quickly identified a sequence filmed at Bangkok's Makasan station, part of the city's airport rail link system, sparking excitement within the country over the significant amount of local filming involved in the production. Behind the scenes, the cinematography duties were divided in a notable way. Greg Fraser, though credited and involved extensively during the pre production phase, ultimately transitioned to a more remote role as filming progressed, a shift driven by his simultaneous commitment to the large scale production of Dune Part 2, slated for a 2024 release. This left Oren Sofer, for whom this represented his first major studio feature, to serve as the primary on-set director of photography for the bulk of principal photography. Edwards, who also took on camera operating duties himself during the shoot, later spoke highly of Sofer's contributions in an interview, describing him as a genuine rising talent within the cinematography field and praising both his intelligence and his visual instincts. Perhaps one of the most widely discussed technical decisions behind the film's production was the camera equipment itself. Rather than using the high end digital cinema cameras typically associated with tentpole studio productions, the filmmakers shot the creator on the Sony FX3, a comparatively low-cost prosumer-grade camera far more commonly associated with independent filmmakers, YouTube content creators, and small-scale productions than with a science fiction epic backed by a major studio. This choice was confirmed publicly by Edwards during a Directors on Directing discussion panel at the 2023 San Diego Comic Con, where fellow filmmaker Louis Leterrier, also present on the panel, remarked that this kind of creative and technical decision making had the potential to fundamentally reshape how films are made going forward. The decision to shoot on a comparatively inexpensive prosumer camera rather than a top tier digital cinema camera is worth situating within the broader context of the production's overall philosophy. Cameras like the Sony FX3 are prized in independent and documentary filmmaking circles for their compact size, lightweight, and ability to be operated quickly and unobtrusively, qualities that align closely with the guerrilla, location driven approach Edwards had mapped out during his early scouting trips. A smaller, lighter camera body allows a production to move through crowded or logistically complex locations with far greater speed and flexibility than a full scale cinema camera rig, which often requires a larger crew simply to operate, support, and transport. For a production intent on capturing dozens of real world locations across multiple countries on a constrained budget and timeline. This kind of mobility was not merely a stylistic preference, but an operational necessity. The unconventional camera choice was closely tied to the production's broader embrace of guerrilla filmmaking techniques. Given the constraints of the $80 million budget, modest by the standards of large scale science fiction filmmaking, the production made a conscious decision to operate with minimal crew sizes and lean heavily on natural available lighting for numerous location based sequences, while also working with limited on set sound recording setups. Rather than constructing elaborate custom sets, or defaulting to fully digital solutions such as extensive green screen work or virtual production technologies like stagecraft, the volume based system popularized on productions such as The Mandalorian. The filmmakers instead opted to send a compact crew to approximately 80 different locations scattered around the globe, each selected because it visually approximated the futuristic science fiction aesthetic the filmmakers were chasing. Only after the editorial team had locked the film's final cut, a stage known in the industry as picture lock, were the visual effects teams brought in to layer in the digital elements atop the practical location based photography. This methodology proved to be enormously cost effective. By Edwards' own estimation, the production ultimately spent only around $80 million on a film that would have realistically cost in the neighborhood of $300 million had it been made using more conventional, effects heavy studio filmmaking approaches. A striking illustration of how resourceful location shooting and a disciplined post production pipeline could dramatically offset costs that would otherwise have gone toward physical set construction or expansive digital effects work completed earlier in the process. In addition to its numerous international location shoots, the production also made use of Pinewood Studios in the United Kingdom for interior scenes and stunt heavy sequences that required more controlled studio environments. The decision to prioritize Thailand as a filming base was not merely a matter of convenience. It reflected the broader thematic architecture of the story itself, which imagines a future Southeast Asian coalition referred to in the film as New Asia that continues to embrace and coexist with artificial intelligence even as much of the Western world seeks to eradicate it following a catastrophic nuclear detonation. Shooting extensively in real Thai locations rather than recreating an approximation of Southeast Asia on a soundstage allowed the production to root this fictional coalition intangible, recognizable geography, lending the film's imagined future a degree of specificity that is often difficult to achieve when a production instead builds composite, invented locations from scratch. The guerrilla filmmaking ethos that defined the shoot also extended to how the production approached logistics on the ground, working with smaller crews than would typically be assembled for a film of this budget and ambition meant that the production could move quickly between locations, adapt to changing light and weather conditions, and capture footage with a spontaneity that is difficult to replicate on a heavily scheduled, tightly controlled soundstage shoot. This approach carried inherent risks, of course, since natural lighting and limited sound recording setups leave less room for the kind of controlled, repeatable conditions that many large scale productions rely on to guarantee usable footage. That the production was able to consistently capture footage suitable for a wide theatrical release while operating with these leaner methods speaks to the meticulous planning that went into selecting locations during Edwards' earlier scouting trips. Principal photography officially wrapped on May 30, 2022, closing out several months of globe-trotting production that had taken the cast and crew across multiple continents in service of Edwards' distinctive location first vision for the film. Post production with filming complete, the enormous task of visual effects work fell to a sprawling coalition of studios and artists, a reflection of both the film's scale and the many different types of digital work required to bring its future world to life. The visual effects were handled by a large roster of studios, including Industrial Light and Magic, ILM, SDX Studios, Yanix, Virtuos, Weta Workshop, Fox VFX, Mars, Mix Studios, Fin Design Plus FX, Outpost VFX, Lecker VFX, Crafty Apes, Jellyfish Pictures, Proof, Territory Studio, Atomic Arts, and VFX Los Angeles. The scale of this collaboration across so many different vendors underscores just how much digital work was required to convincingly integrate futuristic technology, robotic characters, and expansive sci fi environments into footage that had originally been captured largely on location with a lightweight documentary style approach. Contributing further to the film's distinctive futuristic look was production designer James Klein, who had previously worked as a concept artist on Rogue One and reunited with Edwards for this project. Klein's design work extended across the film numerous technological elements, environments, and vehicles, helping unify the aesthetic across dozens of disparate shooting locations and visual effects vendors. Coordinating a visual effects pipeline across such a large number of separate studios and vendors presents its own unique set of production challenges, distinct from the challenges of principal photography itself. Each vendor typically specializes in particular kinds of digital work. Some focus on environment extension and set augmentation, others on character animation, simulation work, such as smoke, fire, or water effects, or compositing footage from multiple sources into a single cohesive shot. Coordinating this many vendors on a single production requires an unusually disciplined pipeline to ensure visual consistency across shots that may have been completed by entirely different teams working in different countries. That the finished film was widely praised by critics for the coherence and believability of its visual world. Despite this fragmented production structure speaks to the strength of the overall visual effects supervision guiding the project. Among the most significant and technically demanding design elements in the entire film was the USS Nomad, the imposing United States military space station central to the film's plot. According to Edwards, designing this singular piece of technology consumed the entirety of the extended COVID-19 pandemic lockdown period. He described the conceptual approach behind the design in vivid terms, characterizing it as merging the visual qualities of a bird of prey with those of an all seeing eye constantly watching over the world below. Two distinct visual metaphors that the design team experimented with combining until the shape felt right for the story's oppressive surveillance state themes. The extended design process behind Nomad reflects just how central this single piece of technology was to the film's broader visual and thematic identity. As the story's most visible symbol of unchecked military surveillance and destructive capability, the station needed to communicate menace, and omnipresence without relying on dialogue or exposition to establish its significance. The choice to merge the visual language of a predatory bird with that of a constantly watching eye gave the design team a concrete conceptual anchor to work from, one that could be refined and iterated upon across the many months of pandemic era lockdown during which much of this conceptual work took place. Even as principal photography had not yet begun, sound design for Nomad and for the film more broadly was handled by Ethan van der Rijn and Eric Ardal, both of whom had previously collaborated with Edwards on Godzilla in 2014. The pair described their approach to crafting the ship's sound effects as something akin to a carefully choreographed dance between music and sound design, one where the two elements complemented rather than competed with one another. One of the more unusual aspects of the post production process involved the film's very early assembly cut, an initial unpolished cut of the film that ran to an extraordinary 5 hours in length. Notably, this assembly cut contained no temporary music tracks whatsoever, relying purely on sound design to carry its emotional and narrative weight. Edwards drew a comparison between this approach and the transitional era of talkies in the late 1920s when synchronized sound was a novel technology being explored for the first time. The decision to withhold music entirely throughout the editing process was a deliberate one intended to ensure that the film's pacing and overall story structure were fundamentally sound and could stand on their own before any score was layered in to enhance them. Edwards later reflected on this unusual choice, acknowledging that while it created significant pressure on the sound design team to carry scenes that would eventually be supported by music, it also prevented the production from using a temporary score as a crutch to paper over structural or storytelling problems that needed to be addressed directly. Once the editorial team had locked the film's structure and pacing without the aid of any music, the production turned its attention to securing a composer for the finished score. On July 17, 2023, Edwards publicly confirmed that acclaimed composer Hans Zimmer had been brought on board to score the film, a significant announcement given Zimmer's stature within the industry as one of the most sought after and instantly recognizable composers working in modern blockbuster cinema. In an intriguing wrinkle revealed later on September 19, 2023, Edwards disclosed that before ultimately settling on Zimmer, he had experimented with a company specializing in AI generated music with the specific goal of having the technology replicate Zimmer's distinctive musical style. While Edwards noted that this experimental process yielded results he found satisfying on a technical level, he ultimately chose to move forward with hiring Zimmer directly to compose an original score for the film, rather than relying on an AI generated approximation of the composer's style. Given the film's thematic preoccupation with the ethical and existential implications of artificial intelligence, this behind the scenes anecdote adds a layer of real world resonance to the production's own creative decision making process. The completed soundtrack was ultimately released digitally by Hollywood Records on September 29, 2023, coinciding with the film's theatrical release date. The unusual sequence of events surrounding the score. An initial assembly cut built entirely without music, followed by an experimental attempt to generate an AI approximation of a composer's style before finally arriving at an original score composed by that same artist, offers a small but telling window into how thoroughly the production's own creative process paralleled the anxieties explored within the finished film, a story fundamentally concerned with where to draw the line between human creativity and machine generated substitutes was quite literally produced using a workflow that grappled with that exact question at the level of its own musical score. Edwards' eventual decision to proceed with Zimmer's original composition rather than the AI generated substitute, despite reportedly being satisfied with the technical quality of the latter, mirrors a choice that numerous other filmmakers and studios have had to navigate as generative AI tools have become more capable and more widely available within various stages of the filmmaking process. Release, theatrical marketing rollout, for the creator began well before its title had even been finalized for the public. A first look at footage from the film was presented at CinemaCon on April 26, 2023, where Anthony D'Alessandro, editorial director at Deadline Hollywood, offered effusive praise for the film's production design, suggesting that it made the visual world of Blade Runner look comparatively simplistic by contrast. The same CinemaCon presentation also marked the moment the studio formally announced that the film's working title, True Love, was being replaced by its final title, The Creator. Edwards later explained the rationale behind the change, noting that the original title sounded far too much like it belonged to a romantic comedy, a tonal mismatch that risked confusing audiences who had no prior familiarity with the project's actual science fiction premise or the footage shown in its trailers. The film's first teaser trailer, set to a remixed rendition of Aerosmith's classic rock song Dream On, premiered online on May 17, 2023, offering audiences their first extended glimpse of the film's tone and visual style. The full official trailer followed roughly 2 months later on July 17, 2023, a date that happened to fall just 3 days after the beginning of the 2023 SAG-AFTRA strike. Several entertainment journalists, including James Whitbrook of Gizmodo and E.J. Tangonan of Joblo.com, noted what they viewed as a striking, if coincidental, thematic overlap between the film's central narrative concerning a war between humans and artificial intelligence and the real world concerns driving SAG-AFTRA's labor dispute at the time, particularly fears among performers regarding studios potentially using AI technology to digitally replicate actors' likenesses without appropriate compensation or consent. Edwards himself acknowledged this uncanny timing in comments he made regarding the film's chosen setting. He explained that when writing a science fiction film, he generally tried to avoid specifying an exact date for the story's events, but ultimately felt compelled to commit to a specific year and settled on 2070. In hindsight, given how rapidly real world conversations and controversies surrounding generative AI accelerated in the months surrounding the film's release, Edwards suggested that the film's marketing had landed in a strangely fortuitous window, arriving just before broader societal anxiety about AI's implications had fully crystallized, rather than well after the fact. Additional promotional beats followed throughout the summer of 2023. Exclusive footage from one of the film's large-scale battle sequences, along with an early listen to portions of Hans Zimmer's completed score, was showcased at the 2023 San Diego Comic-Con on July 21. A behind-the-scenes featurette exploring Edwards' overall creative vision for the film, featuring interviews with members of the cast, was released publicly on August 21, 2023. An exclusive IMAX fan event followed on August 29, roughly 1 month ahead of the film's theatrical debut featuring additional footage alongside a live question and answer session with Edwards himself, held simultaneously in select IMAX theaters across the country. The marketing campaign also extended into some notably unconventional territory in September 2023, incorporating elaborate publicity stunts tied to major sporting events. Actors dressed as the film's fictional AI robots made surprise appearances at a National Football League game between the Los Angeles Chargers and Miami Dolphins at SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, California, as well as at a Major League Baseball matchup between the San Diego Padres and St. Louis Cardinals at Petco Park in San Diego. The promotional push also extended into motorsports with a presence at the first race of the Auto Trader EcoPark Automotive 400 at Texas Motor Speedway in Fort Worth, Texas. Rounding out the promotional ecosystem surrounding the film, a companion book showcasing the film's concept artwork and offering a behind the scenes look at its production, written by James Mottram, was published through Insight Editions and released by Simon & Schuster on November 14, 2023. The choice to pursue promotional appearances at major sporting events rather than relying solely on more traditional entertainment press activities reflects a broader strategy increasingly common among studios seeking to reach large general audience crowds who might not otherwise be following entertainment news closely. Sporting events such as NFL games, MLB games, and NASCAR races draw enormous in person and broadcast audiences that skew differently than a typical film focused press junket, offering studios a chance to plant visual, memorable brand impressions among viewers who may have had little to no prior awareness of the film. Given the constraints placed on more conventional promotional avenues by the ongoing strikes, this kind of large scale, spectacle driven publicity may have taken on add importance for the film's marketing team as they search for ways to build awareness without direct cast participation. Not every aspect of the marketing rollout was received positively, however. On the same day, the official trailer debuted July 17, 2023. The promotional material drew notable criticism after it was discovered that a shot depicting a futuristic Los Angeles being devastated by nuclear detonation had actually been sourced from real archival footage of the 2020 Beirut explosion rather than being an original visual effects creation. The discrepancy was first flagged by a Reddit user before being picked up more broadly, including coverage by the YouTube channel Corridor Crew as part of its recurring VFX Artists React video series, which examines visual effects work across film and television. Roughly 2 months later, on September 15, 2023, Edwards addressed the controversy directly during a Reddit Ask Me Anything session. He clarified that the Beirut footage had never actually been intended for inclusion in the final theatrical trailer, explaining that the use of real archival footage as a temporary placeholder for shots that are ultimately meant to be replaced with finished visual effects is a fairly standard and unremarkable practice within the filmmaking and trailer editing process. He further clarified that the footage in question does not appear anywhere within the finished feature film itself, distinguishing between a rough marketing cut and the completed theatrical release. This controversy, while relatively short lived, offers an instructive glimpse into the sometimes messy realities of trailer production, a process that frequently operates on a compressed timeline and with different creative oversight than the finished film it is meant to promote. The use of real archival footage as a stand in for shots still awaiting completed visual effects is, as Edwards noted, a genuinely common practice within the industry since editors assembling early promotional cuts often need some kind of visual placeholder to represent a shot's intended framing, pacing, and scale before the finished effects work is available. That said, the sensitivity surrounding the specific footage used in this instance, real disaster footage depicting a tragedy with a substantial human toll, understandably prompted a swifter and more pointed public reaction than a more generic placeholder might have drawn, illustrating how even standard industry practices can carry unintended weight depending on the specific source material involved. As the film's release date approached, the production's promotional plans were significantly complicated by the ongoing 2023 Hollywood labor disputes. An early press and industry screening, which had originally been intended to serve as the film's official world premiere, took place at the historic TCL Chinese Theater in Los Angeles on September 18, 2023. Given the ongoing strikes, however, the event took on a somewhat altered character. Props and costumes from the production were put on display in the theater's lobby for attendees, and while the cast was unable to attend or actively promote the film due to strike restrictions, Edwards himself was present and used the occasion to voice his support for the striking actors during a speech delivered before the screening began. The film went on to hold additional premiere events in the days that followed. Its Texas premiere took place at Fantastic Fest on September 26, 2023. The same day, it also received a special opening night screening as part of Beyond Fest at the Aero Theater in Santa Monica, California. That same day, the film's United Kingdom premiere was held at the Science Museum in South Kensington, London, a venue whose scientific focus offered a fitting backdrop for a film so thematically concerned with the trajectory of technology. The creator was ultimately released theatrically on September 29, 2023, distributed by 20th Century Studios, and made available across a range of premium theatrical formats, including conventional theaters as well as IMAX, Dolby Cinema 4DX, and ScreenX presentations. Notably, this release date arrived just 2 days after the formal conclusion of the 2023 Writers Guild of America strike, placing the film's debut at a particularly fraught and transitional moment for the broader film industry. Interestingly, the film's release date had originally been scheduled for October 6, 2023, before being moved up by 1 week following an announcement made during the film's CinemaCon presentation back in April. Upon its actual theatrical release, the creator found itself competing directly against a notably varied slate of new wide releases for opening weekend audience attention, including Paramount Pictures' family-oriented Pablo Patrol, the Mighty movie, and Lionsgate's horror sequel Saw X, an eclectic three-way box office battle spanning family entertainment, horror, and original science fiction spectacle. The broader context of the 2023 Hollywood labor disputes looms large over the entire theatrical rollout of the film, and it is worth pausing to consider just how disruptive this period was for a project so heavily reliant on traditional promotional appearances by its cast. Original non franchise films depend disproportionately on cast driven publicity to build audience awareness, since they cannot lean on pre existing brand recognition the way a sequel or franchise entry can. With both the WGA and SAG-AFTRA strikes limiting the ability of writers and performers to participate in press tours, talk show appearances, and other conventional promotional activities during a critical pre-release window, the film's marketing team had to lean more heavily on director-led promotion, behind-the-scenes footage, and unconventional publicity stunts such as the sports venue appearances by actors dressed as the film's robotic characters. Whether this constrained promotional environment meaningfully suppressed the film's eventual box office performance remains a matter of some debate among the critics and commentators who covered its release, but it is difficult to entirely separate the film's commercial trajectory from the unusual industry circumstances surrounding its debut. Home media following the conclusion of its theatrical run. The creator made its way to digital platforms on November 14, 2023, giving audiences their first opportunity to purchase or rent the film for home viewing outside of a theatrical setting. Physical media releases followed roughly 1 month later, with the film arriving on 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray, Standard Blu-ray, and DVD on December 12th, distributed by Walt Disney Studios Home Entertainment under the 20th Century Home Entertainment label. These physical editions came bundled with a substantial 55-minute behind-the-scenes featurette titled True Love, Making the Creator, a title that consciously nodded back to the film's original working title from earlier in its development, offering longtime followers of the project's journey a bit of continuity between its early conception and its finished form. The film's streaming rollout came shortly after its physical media release, with the creator becoming available to stream on both Disney Plus and Hulu beginning December 20th, 2023, rounding out a fairly typical staggered release pattern common to major studio films distributed under the modern Disney Media umbrella. Notably, the film performed strongly during its initial window on video on demand platforms. During its very first week available for video on demand purchase or rental, the creator claimed the number one spot on both iTunes Movies and Vudu, while landing at number 3 on Google Play. A strong home video showing that stood in some contrast to its comparatively modest theatrical box office performance, suggesting that a meaningful segment of its eventual audience discovered or chose to revisit the film once it became available for home viewing rather than during its initial theatrical run. This pattern, in which a film underperforms relative to expectations in theaters, only to find a considerably more enthusiastic audience once it becomes available on streaming and digital platforms, has become an increasingly familiar narrative arc for original studio productions in the years since the pandemic reshaped theatrical distribution patterns and audience viewing habits. For a visually driven science fiction film specifically, this dynamic carries a certain irony, since a film built so deliberately around large format, wide aspect ratio, cinematography, and premium sound design arguably benefits most from the theatrical environment it was originally designed for. Nevertheless, the film's strong showing across multiple digital storefronts during its opening home video week suggests that positive word of mouth, critical praise for its visual craftsmanship, and the lower financial or commitment associated with a digital rental or purchase combined to draw in a meaningful audience that had either skipped the theatrical release entirely or was seeking to revisit the film in a more accessible format. Reception box office commercially, the creator grossed a combined worldwide total of $104.3 million, comprising $40, 8 million from the United States and Canada, alongside $63, 5 million from international markets outside North America, a result that reflected considerably stronger relative performance overseas than domestically, a pattern not uncommon for original, non franchise science fiction films that must work harder to build audience awareness without the built in recognition of established intellectual property. The gap between the film's domestic and international performance is worth examining a bit further, since it speaks to broader patterns in how original science fiction films are received across different global markets. Franchise driven blockbusters and long running intellectual properties tend to perform disproportionately well in North America, where marketing budgets and cultural familiarity with the source material are typically strongest. Original films without pre existing brand recognition, by contrast, often find a comparatively more receptive audience overseas, where curiosity about ambitious, visually distinctive genre filmmaking can sometimes outweigh the drawing power of a familiar title. The creator's stronger relative performance in international markets, where it earned considerably more than it did domestically, fits within this broader pattern observed across a number of original studio science fiction releases in the years surrounding its debut. In North America specifically, the film opened during a particularly crowded weekend that also featured the wide releases of W Patrol, The Mighty Movie, and Saw X, alongside the broadening theatrical expanse of the financial drama Dumb Money. Prior to release, box office analysts had projected an opening weekend in the range of $16 to $19 million across roughly 3,680 theaters nationwide. The film's actual performance came in modestly below even that relatively cautious projection. It earned $5.6 million on its opening day, which itself included $1.6 million generated from Thursday night preview screenings. Over the course of its full opening weekend, the film ultimately debuted with $14.1 million, landing in third place at the domestic box office behind its higher profile competition. Of that opening weekend total, roughly $3 million came specifically from premium IMAX screens, underscoring the format's importance to the film's presentation, given its ultra-wide 2.76 by 1 aspect ratio and effects-driven visual style. Audience demographic data collected for the opening weekend indicated that men made up approximately 71% of ticket buyers, with 51% of the overall audience falling between the ages of 18 and 34, a demographic profile broadly consistent with typical original science fiction and action releases. The film's box office trajectory continued to soften in the weeks that followed its debut. It earned $6.1 million during its second weekend in theaters, followed by $4.3 million in its third weekend, with the film finishing in fifth place at the domestic box office on both of those subsequent weekends, reflecting a fairly steep and rapid decline typical of films that struggle to build sustained word of mouth momentum during a competitive fall release calendar. In the lead up to the film's release, entertainment journalists and critics offered a range of explanations for the comparatively modest box office projections surrounding the film. Cindy White, writing for the AV Club, pointed to several converging factors contributing to the film's relatively modest expected opening. The fact that it was based on an entirely original concept rather than an established intellectual property with a built-in fan base. The relative lack of widespread name recognition among much of its cast and creative team outside of Washington and Janney specifically. Unfortunate timing, given the intense and rapidly evolving societal and governmental debates surrounding generative AI's growing role in daily life, and a marketing and promotional campaign that had been meaningfully hampered by the concurrent 2023 Writers Guild of America and SAG-AFTRA strikes, which limited the cast's ability to participate. in traditional promotional activities. Not every commentator agreed with this framing, however. Ben Sherlock, writing for Screen Rant, took a somewhat different position, arguing that releasing the film in the midst of ongoing public debate over artificial intelligence actually worked in the film's favor rather than against it, and instead attributed its underwhelming box office performance primarily to its Rotten Tomatoes score and the broader rising cost of movie tickets, discouraging casual theatrical attendance more generally. Following the film's modest $14 million opening weekend, Richard Lawson of Vanity Fair expressed cautious optimism that the film could still find a path to becoming a sleeper hit over time, pointing specifically to its notably healthier box office performance in international market as a potential sign of stronger long-term prospects. In discussing the film's overall merits, despite its box office struggles, Lawson acknowledged that its plotting could feel somewhat derivative and its major twists and emotional beats fairly predictable, while nonetheless praising something he felt was genuinely rare and distinctive in the film's overall execution. He drew a comparison to filmmaker Denis Villeneuve's body of work, suggesting Edwards achieved a similarly ambitious visual and tonal register, but without some of the colder, more self consciously polished stylistic tendencies, sometimes associated with Villeneuve's films, and expressed hope that with Edwards now free from the constraints of a major pre existing franchise like Star Wars, he could continue to be supported and encouraged as a filmmaker capable of producing further ambitious original works along the lines of the creator. Critical response, broadly speaking, the creator received a largely positive critical reception upon its release, with reviewers frequently singling out its visual effects work, cinematography, large scale action sequences, and Edwards' overall directorial vision for particular praise, even as a meaningful portion of critics expressed reservations about aspects of its screenplay and the depth with which it explored its central thematic concerns. This split reception, broad admiration for the film's craft paired with more skeptical reactions to its writing, is a pattern that recurs across nearly every major review of the film, regardless of whether the overall verdict landed on the positive or negative side of the ledger. Even critics who ultimately recommended the film against those who did not tended to agree on which elements of the production succeeded most convincingly, namely its visual ambition, and which elements proved most contentious, namely the depth and originality of its script. On the review aggregation website Rotten Tomatoes, the film held a 67% approval rating based on 324 collected critic reviews, alongside an average rating of 6.8 out of 10. The site's official critical consensus characterized the film as visually stunning and filled with spectacular set pieces, framing it as a timely and well acted science fiction entry that succeeds as an immediate viewing experience, even if it ultimately falls somewhat short in terms of deeper substance. Metacritic, which calculates scores using a weighted average methodology across a curated pool of critics, assigned the film a score of 63 out of 100 based on 54 individual reviews, a figure the site categorizes as indicating generally favorable reviews overall. Audience facing metrics told a somewhat rosier story. Filmgoers surveyed by CinemaScore on opening weekend gave the film an average grade of B dots on the service's letter grade scale, running from A plus down to F, while separate audience polling conducted by Post-Track indicated an 81% overall positive response, with 61% of respondents indicating they would definitely recommend the film to others. Individual critical reviews spanned a fairly wide spectrum of enthusiasm. Maggie Lovett of Collider offered a largely positive assessment, acknowledging that the screenplay carried noticeable flaws and morally ambiguous elements, while nonetheless characterizing the film overall as a genuinely remarkable achievement in original science fiction storytelling. Peter Bradshaw, writing for The Guardian, was similarly enthusiastic, describing the film as an intriguing, stimulating, and exhilarating cinematic experience that meaningfully grapples on both an intellectual and emotional level with what he considered the defining technological issue of the present era. Pete Hammond of Deadline Hollywood offered comparably high praise, calling it one of the more genuinely thought provoking films to emerge in some time, one he felt merited serious critical attention. Brian Truitt of USA Today praised the film's ability to provoke reflection on questions of existence and the surrounding world while simultaneously delivering visually spectacular and satisfyingly explosive blockbuster entertainment. Alex Godfrey of Empire magazine offered similarly glowing remarks, describing the film as an inspired and soulful work of science fiction, one where the consistently stunning visuals served a deeper, emotionally sensitive narrative, and singling out Edwards as a genuinely talented filmmaker capable of producing further immersive cinematic works in the future. Other reviews landed on more mixed territory, acknowledging the film's visual accomplishments while expressing reservations about its narrative depth. A. A. Dowd, writing for IGN, praised the film as a work of pure visual spectacle, highlighting its striking imagery, comparatively economical use of special effects, and richly detailed vision of a futuristic world, while simultaneously suggesting that the film proved considerably less successful when evaluated purely as a dramatic or narrative work of science fiction. Graham Goodman of Screen Rant offered a similarly balanced take, acknowledging that the story could feel somewhat overstuffed and that certain action sequences risked feeling repetitive at points, while ultimately concluding that the film's bold visual ambition and willingness to take creative risks made for a more exhilarating overall experience than what he characterized as safer, more formulaic mainstream blockbusters. Tomris Lafley of their rap offered a nuanced reading of the film's central themes, suggesting that it functioned more effectively as an allegory concerned with acceptance broadly rather than as a specific cautionary warning about artificial intelligence, while still concluding that the film delivered a visually satisfying overall journey worth taking despite its perceived thematic miscalculations. Joey Magidson of Awards Radar offered praise along similar lines, remarking on how genuinely unlike anything else currently in theatrical release the film felt, while stopping short of calling it an instant classic and naming it as a strong early contender for recognition in the visual effects categories of upcoming awards season. Jake Cole of Slant magazine offered particular praise for the film's visual effects work concerning its robotic characters, highlighting how the design work spanned a convincing stylistic range, from plausible near future extrapolations reminiscent of real world robotics companies like Boston Dynamics to more unsettlingly imperfect human like simulants, recalling the android designs seen in Steven Spielberg's AI Artificial Intelligence. Rodrigo Perez of the playlist offered a more measured assessment, characterizing the film as a familiar blend of recognizable science fiction tropes audiences had encountered before in other works, while nonetheless finding Edwards' overall directorial vision largely compelling despite this familiarity. A meaningful contingent of critics, however, offered more overtly mixed or critical assessments of the film. David Ehrlich of IndieWire drew an evocative comparison, describing the film's overall sensibility as landing somewhere between Spielberg's AI, artificial intelligence, and the dystopian drama Children of Men, ultimately concluding that the film succeeded more as a conceptual blueprint for a certain kind of ambitious original science fiction filmmaking than it did as a fully realized movie in its own right. David Rooney of The Hollywood Reporter offered a more explicitly mixed take, characterizing the film in more critical terms as a somewhat bloated and overly sentimental science fiction epic. Peter DeBruge of Variety was notably harsher still, suggesting the film struggled even to maintain internal narrative consistency around its own central premise. Mark Jenkins of The Washington Post criticized the film for failing to adequately develop the personalities and interpersonal relationships needed to grant its central characters a genuinely affecting sense of humanity. Jesse Hassinger of Paste offered a similarly pointed critique, suggesting that for a film positioned by some as a potential last great hope for original studio science fiction filmmaking, it ultimately came across as a surprisingly formulaic and predictable picture. Rafael Montemayor of Film acknowledged the film's visual achievements while criticizing its narrative as predictable and oversimplified. drawing a comparison to James Cameron's Avatar in terms of ambitious world building and big science fiction ideas, while arguing the film lacked the emotional resonance that had helped make Cameron's film such a substantial success, concluding that the resulting movie was a genuinely cool viewing experience without necessarily being an especially good one. Glenn Whipp of the Los Angeles Times echoed a broader sentiment among more critical reviewers regarding the film's originality, suggesting there was very little about the story that felt genuinely fresh, particularly for audiences already familiar with earlier Terminator films. The television adaptation of The Last of Us, or even certain popular merchandise inspired by the Mandalorian's beloved Grogu character. Fionnuala Halligan of Screen International offered a more academically framed critique, arguing that the film ultimately lacked the intellectual depth or ambition present in many of the works it seemed to draw inspiration from, name checking touchstones ranging from Apocalypse Now and Blade Runner to the Terminator and the Star Wars franchise, as well as the imagery found in Martin Scorsese's Kundun. Nicholas Rapold of the New York Times focused his criticism specifically on the film's tonal balance, observing that even as Edwards worked to emphasize the relatable, ordinary qualities of the film's androids and hybrid simulant characters, a persistent undertone of potential menace surrounding artificial intelligence remained difficult for the film to fully escape or resolve. Richard Roper of the Chicago Sun-Times offered perhaps one of the more overtly critical assessments among major reviewers, characterizing the film as a visually impressive but ultimately strange and largely unsuccessful hybrid, one that combined elements borrowed from a wide range of prior works, including District 9, Blade Runner, Ex Machina, and the broader Terminator franchise, alongside stylistic and thematic echoes of films depicting the Vietnam War. Beyond the immediate wave of critical reviews, the creator went on to earn recognition from several major awards bodies in the months following its release, a reflection of the broad critical consensus regarding its technical craftsmanship, even amid more mixed reactions to its screenplay. The film was shortlisted in the categories of Best Sound and Best Visual Effects at the 96th Academy Awards, ultimately going on to secure official nominations in both categories. It was similarly longlisted in the categories of Best Cinematography and Best Special Visual Effects at the 77th British Academy Film Awards, eventually earning an official nomination in the latter category. Additionally, special effects supervisor Neil Corbold achieved a notably rare feat during that awards season, earning simultaneous Best Visual Effects nominations for his work across three separate films released within the same year: The Creator, the historical epic Napoleon, and Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, an unusual trifecta of nominations that underscored the scope and difficulty of the visual effects work he contributed to across multiple prestige productions that year. Taken together, the reception surrounding the creator reflects a film that succeeded in capturing the attention and admiration of much of the critical establishment on a technical and visual level, even as opinions remained sharply divided regarding the depth, originality, and coherence of its underlying story, a tension that would go on to define much of the film's ongoing critical and cultural legacy in the months and years following its theatrical release. This division among critics also mirrors, in many respects, the film's own thematic preoccupations. A story fundamentally concerned with the tension between human judgment and artificial replication, and with the question of whether something built through unconventional or technologically mediated means can nonetheless carry genuine emotional weight, was itself received by critics through a similarly divided lens, with many willing to forgive narrative shortcomings in light of the film's evident craftsmanship and ambition, while others held the finished product to a higher standard given the scale of its aspirations. Few contemporary science fiction releases managed to generate quite the same degree of consensus around their visual and technical achievements while simultaneously provoking such a wide spread of opinion regarding their storytelling. And it is this particular combination that appears likely to define how the creator is remembered and discussed in the years following its release.